Swoosh! Swoosh! So it's been my desire all my life to have a swoosh, and I'm so proud to have my own swoosh. But anyway, I'm Black Dragon. Welcome to Black Dragon Biker News Network. Thank you all for tuning in from wherever it is in the world that you happen to be. And as always, man, I would just like to say thank you for the past almost 8 years. And to my new subscribers, man, thank you all too. Man, we're going to have a great day this morning after I introduce my co-host, Mike Ball.
Wake up!
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's Black Dragon and Mike Ball, Monday through Friday, doing our thing. Yeah, ching-a-ling, ching-a-ling. We're doing our thing Monday through Friday. So let the bells ring. Hey, Mike.
That's
They
right.
can see us. They can hear us on Spotify. They can hear us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook. Come on. Where are we not? Where are we not, Mike Ball? I want to know where we are not as the #1 biker news channel in all the world. Yes.
Yes, sir.
And you know what, Mike Ball?
Hmm.
I am so glad you made it with us this morning. It's good to have you. I know
I almost didn't.
No, man.
I almost did it.
We have Mike Ball the Wise here. Mike Ball the Wise. It is so cool to have you, man.
No, and vice versa for me being here. Thank you for always having me, man.
So some back news. Mike Ball was he didn't get any sleep last night. He didn't get to bed till 3 o'clock this morning.
No, it was actually 6 o'clock my time that I actually fell asleep.
Oh my God.
But it was only for an hour.
I got a text message from you at 3, which was 6 my time.
Yeah.
And I didn't look at it until 8 or 9 or something. And I said, oh my God, Mike's not going to be here. So this was going to be your first day of absence. I didn't even know what I was going to do, man.
Nope. We still made it.
We
Last
made it.
second.
We made it.
Last
Hey,
second.
listen, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I made a statement. I said, hey, looky here, man. There's no crisis at the border. This is all political. This is all BS. I don't believe it. Like, nothing has changed in my life. I'm still doing the same things I always ever did. And you were all quiet and stuff. Like, I'm going to let him get into that all by himself.
Hey, that's okay.
So
You let me go in and dive deep on my subjects too.
I've allowed you to dive deep before. So I've been getting text messages and stuff and emails and, oh, Black Dragon, So I said, okay, fine. I'm going to get some local people somewhere where there's a border. El Paso. There's a border there, right?
There is definitely a border.
And I'm going to ask them what they see. We're going to always do both sides of the story. Both sides of the story. We're going to always do that.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so I need to talk to somebody there. I don't care what the politics. I don't trust the news. I want to talk to I am the news. That's we're the news, Mike. We don't trust ourselves.
Hey, look, we don't trust anyone but ourselves.
Oh, there we go. So I don't trust the news. I want to talk to some. So we got a couple people. We got a guy who has been a news anchor there in El Paso for over 10 years. His name is Andrew Polk, and he's been on iHeartRadio and all kinds of things. He can tell you all the different things he's been on, but he's been around the scene for a minute. And he comes to us through someone that we've interviewed before, beautiful woman, biker by the name of Flex. And I think she's like a
I was wondering if there was this connection here. I was waiting because I heard you say iHeart and then El Paso on top of all this.
You knew she was coming. Mike Ball the Wise knows everything.
I didn't want to assume.
Yeah, well, yeah, you were right. So, yeah, Flex is back on the show. You first introduced us to Flex.
That's right.
Back when you in Hollywood were doing your thing.
That's right.
And so she's back on the show. She's a female biker, and she does all kinds of stuff for children. They guard over children and stuff in the work that she does in her part of her biker world and her journey. But she also lives in El Paso, Texas. And we can learn a lot of things from her, how to lift weights and eat healthy and everything, how to be a mom, how to be a biker, She has tattoos everywhere, so we could probably learn about tattoos.
I got a couple.
I have not one tattoo anywhere on my body.
I got them going in my heart, in my armpits.
Look at you, Mike. Wow.
I'm all tatted up.
You
know that
today, man. You guys.
Decisions.
So let's introduce our guest here, because
yes, absolutely.
You're gonna say you're picking on Mike.
Yeah.
So let's introduce our guest here.
All right.
Hey, we have Andrew Polk and Flex. What's up, y'all?
What's going on, everybody?
Hey guys, how are you? Good to be back.
Thanks for having me.
Listen here, radio guy. I'm not going to have you coming over here blowing up our mics. You're not going to sound better than us on our program. I will mess your mic up on purpose. Okay. All right.
I'll put some
deep over here, not you. Look this guy trying to take over our show, Mike.
That's what happens.
This is a radio professional, so we need to sit back. We're getting ready to be overdone here, Mike, but that's all right. So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about you, my friend. Welcome to the show, first of all. I'm sorry for attacking you. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I mean, it is what it is, and we got a lot to talk about today here. So, yeah, my name is Andrew J. Polk. I've been an anchor and reporter and just talking about stuff going on in our what we call the borderland community here in El Paso, Desert Southwest for years now. I've been in print, radio, TV, all kinds of internet journalism. So covering a lot of these issues. We usually talk about what's going on, what's affecting us here in the borderland region, again, as we call it. And this has been one of those hot topics about what has been going on. Border security and immigration issues have been fairly well dominant, if not near the headlines or the top of the headlines it's always been there, but reaching the real attention grabbers above the fold, certainly in the last few years, if not more.
So, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming, especially on such short notice. And sorry we didn't have our act together, but I really appreciate working through all of the technical difficulties and getting the mics up and running. So, thank you for that. Just to get started, I started. Okay, so I don't want this to be particularly a political thing today. I want to discuss the facts as they are, as presented. I could care less who's on what side. I was in the military. I fought for America. I care about America. Mm-hmm. So I made a statement the other day that I don't believe there's a border crisis. But I don't live on the border, and nothing for me has changed. I still, over here in Georgia, I haven't seen yet what everybody, somebody said an invasion. Mm-hmm. There's an invasion. I believe what Gaza is going through is an invasion. What the Ukraine is going through is an invasion. What happened in the Sudan and those are invasions to me. The D-Day on Normandy, that's an invasion. When you say invasion to me, I'm thinking bodies, explosions, all kinds of stuff. So when these guys are yelling, there's an invasion, is there an invasion? Is there a crisis? And if so, what does it look like? So I just want to talk to somebody that lives there that says, yes, we have an invasion. No, it's a crisis. No, it's nothing at all. So I'm so glad that you could come and talk to us, you and Flex. And so my first question is there an invasion? What is it? And if there is, what does that look like?
The way I think of invasion in military terms, much like you're talking about there, is, an armed incursion in order to overthrow or take over swaths of a country's territory. Ukraine and Gaza make a lot of sense here. And there are people who use that phrase. There are people who use crisis. Crisis was its own political phrase there for a minute of, is it a crisis or not, or is it a situation? And I would say that we've pretty much come down to, yeah, it is a crisis. At the very least, here in our local area, we have now had the third disaster declaration put forth by either our city council or by the mayor of the city of El Paso, now renewing that most recently in order to get more resources, more material, more things that we need in order to deal with what we are seeing at this point. So, I mean, we have been seeing on the order of thousands, if not some high watermarks have been at 10,000 people coming through our immediate region and immediate city area, basically on a weekly basis. And that has ebbed and flowed. Sometimes it's in the order of hundreds, then in thousands, and again, 10,000 is about the most we've seen in a week. But I mean, this has been a ongoing situation since, I mean, that first disaster declaration in our area was in late 2022. So, and we've been seeing different waves of it even for years beforehand. So it's never not been a thing here. The people crossing the border in all variety of fashions, but specifically when we're talking about the illegality of it and the issues that come along with it. Yeah, it's definitely crisis. Is in fact, our city government, they have dashboards that they have that go through and track these things. And it's literally called the Migrant Crisis Dashboard. So crisis was a political phrase there for a minute, but I think it's pretty much now there are, once you're needing to call out State Guard, National Guard in order to deal with the influx of people and just the sheer logistics of it. Yeah, we're at crisis stage for sure.
So what does it look like when you say as many as 10,000 people in a week? What does that look like to a city like El Paso?
So particularly at that point, that was at the end of 2022 when, to delve into the politics of it for a minute of what the situation was, end of Title 42, which was the pandemic era restrictions that was basically no one can enter the country. I mean, people were crossing, they had visas, people were flying around places, but when it came to asylum processes, it wasn't even a policy, it was a one-line executable of if entering the country, remove from country. And that was it. And so what you had is you want to do the SpongeBob me, take the problem and shove it over there. That's all that it was. And so it wasn't solving anything. It wasn't dealing with the situation. It was just kind of compounding it. And so with the end of that, there's now what's called Title VIII and some other things that have been put in place by the current administration. And what that does is it's people entering the country and doing so in an unauthorized, illegal manner. They then have encumbrance upon them, meaning that they cannot enter again for a certain time period, or they would face penalties, jail time, those kind of things, as opposed to which was previously of just you're going back, just go back. That's what all it was. So when that policy was changing, that's when we saw a lot of people, because there's so many facets to this that I'll be surprised if just us discussing about what we were going to talk about today, it took us about better part of 2 hours with Flex and I just kind of workshopping through this. So we'll see what we can get to, but we have seen here in the city of El Paso, I mean, there's some graphics we sent you. I don't want to put those up of just the amount of people that have gone through, the amount of buses that
What graphic do you want me to put up first?
The one with the pie chart. That would be probably the most useful one. It's kind of a case in point for people who have a hard time kind of visualizing this. So this is from the City of El Paso website, elpasotexas.gov/migrant-crisis. And it doesn't actually give the time frame of it here, but I'd be pretty confident saying at least covering 2023, if not, again, part of 2022, that there have been more than 600 buses. So full passenger bus loads of people sent from just, again, our area, the El Paso, Texas area, to primarily 4 cities, primarily New York City, but also then Chicago, Denver, and a little bit to Philadelphia. That's kind of a new aspect of it here. So these are bus loads full of people, and this is not even countering those people sent out by planes. They were chartering planes, at least not from this level, but individual plane tickets, or people who are getting hospitality or being supported by other groups or nonprofits. Basically, the method has been around here is that our area, and along with other sections of the border, Eagle Pass gets talked about a lot, and we can talk about that. And some people I've talked with from that area a little bit further. But from our area, that basically the method has been keep it moving, because I mean, at like the 10,000 people showing up at one point, and we even have heard the mayor of New York City saying that we can't take anymore. So the only basically response that we've had being able to be mounted from our areas to you talk about the differences between the state and federal response to it. State has been tried to stop it up, though there also has been bustings from the state. We can talk about that in a minute. Or the federal has been to process it through to keep there from being humanitarian crises. So at certain points, we have seen in sectors of the second ward of our area, what we call Segundo Barrio, around some churches that were providing basically humanitarian services, people crowding in the streets and camping out on the streets and sleeping on the streets in rough conditions and in rough weather. And that has been the situation that we've seen off and on. At this point, I would say it's being a little bit better handled. Among other things, our city has bought a couple of old schools and turned them into
okay.
like middle schools and turned them into shelters.
Let me slow you up for a second. Let's talk for just a second. Total 607 charters. What are you telling me? You're telling me 607 buses have left there with people
Packed.
going to these cities? Is that what you're saying?
These were full chartered buses. So that number of buses does not include individual tickets, planes, or other forms of transportation going out of the area. That is just the ones that from the city of El Paso. There have also been other county level efforts going on here, and then a whole other swath of state level efforts of busing to other places. So this is one part of it, but yeah, that is funded from the city of El Paso.
And during that time that you're talking about, where it was an influx of like tens of thousands, there was, like you said, there was people living downtown on the street. It was cold. There was children on the street. I know one of the members of our organization, Guardians of the Children, he bought, and he wasn't the only one to do this. They were buying scarves, the blankets for the kids that were out there. On our freeways, we had signs like the electronic sign saying "Watch for pedestrians" on the freeway. There was an excess of litter and tents and shoes and clothes. I forgot what they called it, but it was an alert that was sent out to phones because immigrants were hiding in backyards. They were going into houses. They were knocking on doors, asking for help. So, I mean, that's always kind of been an issue here. But during that time, it was.
Let's stop for a second. I'm pulled up something. How many people does a bus carry? It says 24 to 30 persons. Does that sound about right? So 30 times 607 is 18,210 people. Does that make sense?
That sounds about right. If you actually look on that graphic again, it actually says that 10,000 have been received from CBP, and of the charter amount, it's actually 27,000. So I would say confidently covering 2023, probably a bit of 2022 here, but the chart there doesn't reflect the exact time frame of that, unfortunately.
So it's saying that it has put 27,000 people on charter buses out of just. But we don't know the exact time frame, but we think it's between, say, 22
to now, give or take. What time frame in 2022 that we had some of the disaster declarations towards the end of it. There was a little bit of busing happening before that. I do want to make one thing clear, is that the leaders of El Paso and doing these decisions want to make this very distinct from then the state level efforts, which were kind of inherently political in nature. This was if we don't, we will be overwhelmed and we'll be unable to deal with these things and will lead to humanitarian crisis, all those kind of concerns going along with it. That was the reason essentially for that disaster declaration, in which we then saw other things coming forth, including the Texas State Guard coming out, setting up the barbed wire that had been kind of happening in other parts of the border, like Eagle Pass that I mentioned, which has been its own contentious issues and some of that stuff that people may have heard more about, but it's been happening in our area as well.
What is CBP? Total migrants received from CBP?
Customs and Border Protection, which is the agency over the Border Patrol itself. CBP is basically the ones that actually handle the ports of entry, and then Border Patrol falls under them.
Something doesn't seem right. There's 10,000 received from CBP, but 27,000 sent out. What are we missing?
Not all of them are being processed through CBP is the short answer there. So when we've talked about, or you may have seen in the news, images of people, in clumps at the border fence or being processed through and things like that. Those are the ones that are either then being turned away or then processed through by CBP. But there is not a solid border fence in any particular area. There basically has been one in one format or another in the city of El Paso for the last few decades. It has sometimes been just like a chain link fence, and now, or you wall, or all those kind of phrases you can get into if you want to. But in our area, it's basically the city limits of El Paso and a little bit into New Mexico. We're kind of down near the Boot Hill, not quite of New Mexico. But then it stops in other places. So there are places where you can just walk across, and you can just go straight from Mexico into United States with there being no physical barriers between you.
Like, I'm literally driving down the street to work or wherever, and I could throw a rock into Mexico. And then there's plenty of videos and stories of, it's true, where you see people crossing the Rio Grande. And even though here in El Paso, it's not as big as it is in other parts, but there's been a lot of bodies found, a lot of drownings. You see kids crying because the parents are like, go, 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 they're carrying them across. There's different people that are hired to help carry them across. And the Rio Grande is, it's dangerous. Some parts you lose your footing and you're gone. And, I've seen,
I was always under the impression that you could just walk across the Rio Grande.
Some parts.
So we have what I refer to as a part-time river around here. Like right now it is, water has been released. There's a lot of agriculture and stuff like that goes on here. But for good chunks of the year, there may be no water into it. It may just be basically a ditch that has no water in it in our area. So people may have seen images of people like crossing an Eagle Pass where they're actually wading through. There it's like an actual river, or if people have heard of like the floating barriers that have been put up in the river. That's not our section because there ain't enough water for that in our section.
But there's still areas where you can drown there, obviously.
Yeah, most of the water that does come through gets put into canals. So because again, for the agricultural use, and so those are concrete in channels that can run very deep, and so it may not look that fast on the top, but you can then get swept under the undertow. And there are water rescue units out here in the desert Southwest because of that, and so that's where the danger comes in.
Okay, so
and there's been rushes, like I know someone personally where hundreds of people are on the other side and they just they like try to run through, and it's happened where it's like you're thinking at a concert how they just have those certain exits
stampede.
They're literally stampeding in because they really can't stop all of them, and that's happened a lot more recently as well.
So what does that look like to you as a mom with children? What do you think about security, safety, those kinds of things as you're seeing things like that?
Personally, I know people that go back and cross. I have family members that have, her kids are in Juarez, and she brings them back and forth. So I can see a lot of points of view. As a mom, I have avoided certain parts of town. I won't go to certain places by myself anymore. And I'm not, fragile little flower. It's just I'm not going to put myself in that situation when I see the news. I see it for myself. I used to enjoy going downtown a lot more. And now, especially at the end of 2022, I wouldn't have gone by myself. There was a lot of robberies happening. There was a lot more people on the street. I know there was there's some of my relatives that they were worried because there was people crossing through their backyards. And so, it's not affected me as much just because I no longer go back and forth between Juarez. I haven't for a long time. But I know that, it does, I do feel a little bit less safe, I guess. I still love my city. I still love my town. I just will avoid certain areas. And I know, like he was saying, that there's some schools that they're actually converting into shelters. So I know those parents are up in arms because their kids go to that school and they've decided that they're going to shut down that school to make it a shelter. So I know that there's a lot of parents that are upset about things like that. Like those are different ways that it is affecting our city.
Right. Yeah, when it's affecting the kids and then our own families at home, it's close to home now.
Trafficking is, that's always been an issue on the border. But especially with the work that I do with kids, and especially with iHeart, I interview a lot of nonprofits. And so, one of them is the Paso del Norte Center for Hope, and they're talking about the most trafficked age here is 14. And so, I have an 18-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so it worries me a little bit more when there's people here that they're coming over and I don't know what their situation is and I don't know what their plan is, I guess. So, it worries me. It does a little bit more.
What I'll say, and particularly what she's talking about there, is that so the crossings and the dealing with just the bulk of humanity, because when you're talking about thousands of people, you just got to get down to core logistics of dealing with that. That has been, I would say, more or less contained. People have been crossing in random areas, but the response to it has been pretty much at the transit hubs. So there have been certain facilities that have been set up, and for those schools, these are schools that were, because of configurations within the local school districts that were vacant, were previously schools. The people who lived in those neighborhoods who thought they were living across from the school and it's now becoming a completely different facility, yeah, they have had some concerns with it. Not aware of any schools that have been like shut down just for this purpose, but they were like being reconfigured. The city has now bought them, those kind of things. What has been a bit more in the community and even affected right across from the iHeartRadio station has been what I refer to as rabbiting. But so people crossing the border and just gumming across, and people, what the vast majority of what still happens to this point is people then claiming asylum, saying, I am claiming asylum, and that then starts a whole legal process that has been referred to in the State and the Union and other parts like that. That's another conversation in its own. But then it doesn't just stop there. There's really two critical aspects of then continued illegality even beyond that process of what becomes human trafficking at this point. I mean, it's always human trafficking, but then it doesn't just stop once people cross. It then often continues on. So two of those facets are what are called stash houses and then continued transportation. So the stash houses, there have been dozens. It's hard to pin down an exact number because the enforcement is ongoing, but at the very least dozens in the last year of, we're talking about what may look like houses, warehouses, but even just like in regular neighborhoods. But the big difference is there's a lock on the outside that does not open from the inside because people are then kept in there because of, you got to remember that the reason that this is happening, among other things, that there's a lot of money at stake here because the people that are being brought across, this is not being done by largely, I mean, there may be some, but they're not being done by humanitarian organizations. They're being done by the cartels because we're talking about like 5 figures plus per person that they are getting for the money off. They're convincing people to sell everything they have, all their property, everything, in order to say, we'll get you there. And then all you have to do is claim asylum. But then some of them, if the cartels think so, say, you didn't give us enough money, so we're going to hold on to you here for a minute until you can get more money out of your friends, relatives, what have you. And so that's the stash house phenomenon.
So you said $50,000?
Some cases at the very like 10,000 is what I hear quite a lot. Is like the cost per person, and the idea of, I mean, there's literally a whole marketing campaign. There have been materials that have been
so you got to pay to get up here. I didn't.
Yeah, there's tiers.
Oh yeah,
like package. It's like getting packages. Totally VIP treatment, straight shots, and doing planes instead of crossings, cars instead of walking.
So how is the border this porous that you can purchase a package that you can fly in versus one where you walk in? This is crazy. There's
always been an aspect of illegal crossing that has happened in our area. Really, the phenomenon that's happening now is that there have been so many people showing up at the border that across the administration, the response has varied slightly. During the previous administration was a lot of saying, well, we can't process you today, but it's all pretty much in this modern era. There's been a lot of changes over the years. In the modern era, it's been pretty much focused on asylum. That's why there's been so much talk about it in the news and then like the State of the Union and in policies, because asylum is a legal process and part of international treaties that the U.S. has signed on to, among other things, saying that someone who feels at threat or needs to leave their country for fear of their life, etc., or for being a persecuted class, what have you, can come here and claim asylum. And that's why, in the modern day, the cartels, they literally, again, put out marketing material saying, hey, all you need to do is claim asylum and you'll get everything you want in the U.S. And that is, again, not accurate in anything civil about this is usually inaccurate, but that's what they're saying. And that's how they're convincing people to sell everything they have, anything that they can't carry with them in order to get here and be brought here. So the thing about any kind of border barrier, at least, okay, in our section and in a part of the Rio Grande, by treaty, the international boundary between the United States and Mexico is the center channel of the Rio Grande. So any barriers that are being built entirely on U.S. soil. So even if they're at the barrier, they're on U.S. soil. And so by the agreements that the United States has signed on to with the international community, they're on U.S. soil, which means they have met the requirements to be able to claim asylum. Now, the actual process of it through is a process that can take years at this point. There's a huge backlog, but they're here and they can claim that. And that's been the major mechanism. This is a stark difference from, like, say, 20 years ago when it was usually, so what comes out of it is that we have people that are crossing and are looking for authorities. They want to find Border Patrol saying, hey, I want to claim asylum, I want to start this process, as opposed to like 30 years ago when it was largely, single adult males, largely who were just looking to kind of just get across, have no interaction with authorities, find a job, send money back home, that kind of a thing. This, we're now seeing like, large groups of people, family units. There was a whole unaccompanied minor crisis that has still been going on. So
they're finding a lot of kids by themselves.
Yeah. So it's a whole different animal than it used to be. So porousness and the way it's being organized is, the right way to deal with it. We're dealing with just a whole, it's like if you had you were dealing with some water, you had a creek that you're dealing with, and now you're dealing with a whole tide. It's just a completely different animal than it used to be.
And you're right about that, because 35 or 40 years ago, 1987, 86, 87 or so, I was asleep in a rest stop in California on my way traveling to Oklahoma. I was in the Navy, and I was awakened at the rest stop. I went to sleep in a rest stop with the windows rolled down somewhere in the forest in California. And I was awakened. I was pushed awake by a single male Mexican man who was not trying to be found by any authorities. He had a map he couldn't read, and he wanted me to direct him as to where someplace in Northern California was. And he thought it better to wake me up and almost get shot. He thought it was better to wake me up. And it's what stopped me from sleeping in rest stops, by the way. He did me a favor, but he pushed me awake, and he didn't speak. It scared the Lord Jesus out of me. And I got out of the car, and he laid the map down on the car and asked me in the best way we could communicate how to get to Northern California. And I drew it out for him. And you're right. That was completely different than what I see today. That was my experience with that. It's completely different than what I see today. Had it been a whole family, but they're not looking to find an escape route to Northern California where they can go to work. They want to go find an authority. And I thought that was strange when I was seeing that. I didn't understand until you explained it, why they would all cross and then go find an authority, because I remember
you're right,
immigration from the 90s when I was in the Navy, and we had there was security with the Border Patrol and all this kind of stuff working hand in hand. And I remember that everybody was running from the Border Patrol
and getting thrown back over 6 times straight,
not running to them. So that's really crazy. Let's get back to the point that I interrupted you at, where you were talking about the houses are now locked from the outside in. Go back to that.
Yeah, the stash houses because essentially all of this we're talking about is human trafficking and being done by the cartels and other criminal organizations. Coyotes is a phrase that we use for those that are doing like the last mile delivery, the ones who are actually doing taking the groups across, guiding them through, what have you. And they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are money-making they are the cartels that are also doing drugs. And sometimes, and oftentimes even these days, they'll use this. There's always been like, a distraction so we can run something through in another area. Now they're using one criminal enterprise to then cover for another one where, hey, if they've got, Border Patrol tied up because we got 1,000 people, we just put on this fence here, maybe they won't notice the truck we're trying to get through in this other area that's filled with, multa or what have you, and all that kind of thing. So that's another facet of this is changing. But again, if they're still criminal enterprises, they are not doing this because they're just, we want to help people. They're doing this because they can take as much money out of them as possible. So the two aspects, the stash houses, if they bring them across, and it's basically it can be a held for ransom or just held for further transport of we think you have more money, so we want you to give us more money, and so you're going to stay here until you give us more money. So call your family, call your friends, do whatever you're going to do. But then there's also the regular, quote unquote regular human trafficking of, we think that you have some skills that we're going to use, be it either physical or appearance in nature. I don't want to get much more unsavory than that, but sexual exploitation, worker exploitation is also a part of this. And so we have there was a horrific circumstance in the last couple of years in San Antonio where an entire tractor trailer full of people was left abandoned in the sweltering sun, and majority of the people in there died, just baked to death. Basically, the recent court case came down with some severe penalties for those that were convicted in that case. But what happens mostly in our situation, and I suspect in many other areas, is they are then basically, as opposed to one bulk item like that, they're then put into like individual passenger cars, like crammed to the gills, as many seats as possible kind of thing. But then they are just trying to go to points wherever else. It's not really clear where they're going to try to go to do, but we've seen enforcement in our area originally being done by like Border Patrol, federal authorities, now largely being done by state level, state troopers in our area under what is called Operation Lone Star, of there being increased, particularly along, major corridors, the interstate highways and major state highways in our area, of trying to pull over suspicious cars. And so what I refer to as rabbiting, because the modus operandi of these seem to be that as soon as there is any interaction with law enforcement, they floor it. So that's why I call it rabbiting. They just try to bolt. And again, even across my former workplace, I'm no longer with iHeartRadio, but still do some projects with them. There was a restaurant right across the street that got run into by one of these vehicles that was fleeing from law enforcement. Can't remember if it was state troopers or local, and crashed into the building, took out a part of the corner of it. Everyone in the building was fine. And then the reason I particularly call it rabbiting is because then the people in the vehicle then tend to scatter, because either people who are being transported for whatever reason, not wanting to then be caught because they were then trying to avoid authorities, and certainly then the driver of the vehicle, because they're facing serious charges for human trafficking and exploitation.
So that's another thing that kind of worries me. My daughter just started driving. She got her driver's license. And BD, I don't know if you saw that video I sent you of, it was one of these instances where, it was trafficking. The guy tried to run. He hit another car. That car, the people were trapped in it. And there's a video where it just bursts into flame. And unfortunately, there was a family in there. Mm-hmm. And you can hear the audio is not that pleasant to listen to, but that's another thing that worries me. I've been seeing a lot more of it in the news with these things happening, to the point where they're like, it's actually safer. It's I don't know if it's protocol now to just let them go, because it's more dangerous to chase them down. It was causing way too many accidents.
Wow. Let's look at this graphic here. You sent me a lot of stuff, so I don't want to
Fair enough.
Talk to me about this graphic. What does this mean?
So that's the one, I believe, of looking at the right one here, of the amounts of people that are coming across and how they are being handled more specifically. So let me pull up the right version of here. Look at what exactly looking at. So this is the levels they were seeing at any given point here. So we talked previously about the busing that was going on. So with this one, that is a view of exactly how many are coming through at any given point. So there's, again, like I said, ebbs and flows that come along with this. So currently, and for the most recent full week, releases happening in our area. So these are ones that have been processed by federal authorities and then kind of handed off either to the nonprofit community in our town that deals with this, tries to offer like the hospitality and keep people off the streets, or the city or other local government run shelters. There was 4,633. that were released in El Paso. And again, even just this is just our area. This is not representative of the entire border area. This is just the El Paso, Texas area. And so you can see there have been other kind of high water marks here, like most recently, the most recent in the recent weeks was second to last week of the year. There was just shy of about 6,500. And if you scroll all the way back, and you can see that at the end of 2022, there was that 10,000 mark. Yeah, that's just a screenshot. I sent a view of that one, but you can see the ebbs and flows. But it hasn't been in the last weeks, except for the last week of the year, which I think was just slow operations. We've been above 1,000 a week and above 5,000 a week for a good chunk of it for the last few months, at the very least. Yeah,
this is really kind of this is just weird. This is wild. Like you're looking at. This is a 7-day rolling average. This sometimes up to 5,900, like you said, 10,000 at one time. You can see this daily thing here. Here this thing here, 1,100, 1,094. This as low as 400. But this is people per day coming in, and your rolling average your week. That is man, that's crazy. That's crazy.
So one of the things that's a significant difference in our area is that El Paso, again, there's always been like low levels of everything going on. You look at El Paso on like a satellite map without any of the international boundaries or any of the stuff on it, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference, because El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, the bigger city right across to it, it's kind of meshed all one together. Used to be, frankly, like going from like one state to the other. Like my grandmother back in the day, back in the 90s, used to go across like at least once a week, visit with friends, have lunch, that kind of thing. 9/11 happened, security completely changed, and now in this situation, it's even more so with where we have barbed wire at the border, among other things. But we have a lot of people that cross for, business. We have people who live on one side, work in the other. Kids may go to school on the opposite side as well. Medical reasons, this whole medical tourism industry, that's another issue and another subject. But there's a lot of legitimate and like trade, transit, travel, all this goes on. It's estimated that like a quarter of all jobs in El Paso are directly related to cross-border trade. We have, half a dozen ports of entry just in our area alone, just to facilitate all of that, even beyond the, just miles of border that exist on its own. So that has been one of the, driving forces of the El Paso and regional economy. And El Paso is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, depending on how you slice it, border crossings on the border itself, as ports of entry. So that's a huge focus for a lot of the response that happens is keeping that going. But when it comes to dealing with this and this issue with the immigration and the crossings that are coming along with it, dealing with it, basically the local response has been keep it moving, because otherwise we're going to outstrip our local resources. That's why you see then the aspects of the busing and of moving people through, and if you kind of just keep it going, because if it stops here, local leaders basically have, without saying it as much, that we're going to be in a world of hurt, because we're going to start running out of resources, we're going to start running out of things to help deal with people, and having large groups of desperate people seeking for anything is not a good recipe for anything that you want to have happen.
Right. We see that in all of our in-world scenarios, or whatever the case may be. A large number of desperate people can turn into a mob of fighters, or anything. Turn into a mob of anything. You sent me a lot of articles. Let's talk about some of them. Here is one. Texas National Guard reinforces border with razor wire following Governor Abbott's orders. So why did you send me that, and what's remarkable about this that you want to talk about?
So after there was that initial disaster declaration put forth by the city of El Paso for the anticipated end of Title 42, and there being a lot of people, after in the time frame of those 10,000 plus a week of people being released into the El Paso community, that was one of the responses then. So Operation Lone Star has been a program been put in place by the state of Texas for a few years now, at least, into dealing with immigration and border security. It's been kind of the blanket under which a lot of the stuff that is going on with the state level busing. And another thing to put through here, that is not the some of that is National Guard, but there's also a state guard, because Texas has its own military department, which is its own weird thing in its own right that I won't delve too far into, but they report directly to the governor of Texas in that capacity. So that razor wire that you're actually looking in that picture right there, in that segment, they put it up across the border, they put it along the actual border with Mexico and New Mexico, but that section right there that you're looking at in that picture, that's actually between Texas and New Mexico. That is between two U.S. states that is being put in under the orders of Governor Greg Abbott.
Wow. Why are they moving? Is this to stop them from moving between states? Well, you never even think about that.
Yeah, so there's differences in different administrations that occur between Texas and New Mexico. New Mexico currently being a blue state at the moment, and Texas certainly being a red one. So there's been some political purposes that have been either tacitly or overtly put forth by Governor Greg Abbott here in New Mexico, and again, Democrat Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in New Mexico. So I think it was a little bit of a statement. The reason that was put forth officially was that this was because with New Mexico having its different policies and not part of, again, Operation Lone Star, not doing their aspect of that, is, some people cross into New Mexico and then into Texas from there. So that's part of that here. But yeah, so those are some of the state level efforts that start coming in, has been primarily focused on physical barriers. We've seen aspects of a lot of Humvees, military style vehicles been parked along here. Other pictures that have been seen in other parts like Eagle Pass has been of like state trooper vehicles all throughout and stuff like that. So there's been, I'd say, between the state and federal, very different types of responses. State has been primarily physical barriers, try to stop people from crossing, and then that's when they get into conflict and the discussion at the best that's been going back and forth between that and the federal, where the federal has been tried to, okay, let's deal with the humanitarian issues. While another thing that's going on here, there's been no substantive new immigration laws passed in decades at this point. So that's another aspect of this. Yeah.
Okay, so what about this story? Governor Greg Abbott deploys 200 tactical Texas guards members to El Paso. So the Tactical Texas Guard is the state guard you're talking about.
Yeah, that's state guard, because again, Texas has its own military department, and no, it is not a weird subsection of the National Guard. It is a separate organization because Texas used to be a country and has some holdovers from that and weirdness that is a whole rabbit hole to go down into. But that has been part of, again, the state level response that has been going on through all of this, which has been focused on the kind of enforcement. And there are National Guard that have also been part of this, though I'll say that for the most part, not to exclusion, but for the most part, the National Guard has been coming here, has been towards supporting the existing federal authorities, like, again, Border Patrol, CBP, those kind of things, whereas the state has had basically its own sometimes contradictory efforts that has led to cases going before the Supreme Court at this point.
Wow. So what about this story here? He deploys 200 members to El Paso. What was that for, and what was significant about that?
So yeah, that was around the time of one of the ebbs and flows, or the flows at this point here, and those were not the only people. That was in addition to already deployments that were happening here. There have been deployments, again, quote unquote deployments, happening with the state guard through a lot of the area. Again, Eagle Pass is one of the other hotbeds that get talked about quite a lot. We've been having state troopers, and those have been the ones that have been primarily dealing with, again, what I refer to as the rabbiting situation of all of the people that are, and again, the individual transports and those kind of things. That has been primarily the state trooper response happening in our area, but this just shows that there is continuing to be a focus, and the way that the state is handling that kind of differently with its focus on force, I guess, would be a kind of simple way to phrase it.
So explain to me, if you can, what has happened between this idea or I haven't followed this as close as this, so I'm learning as I go, but where you had the face-off between the Border Patrol and, is it the State Guard or the National Guard, and how did that work?
State Guard and state troopers, again, kind of just under the omnibus of Operation Lone Star, would be a simple way to put it here. So that has been there's a bunch of ways you can refer to it. Let's call it, face-off, or I don't want to say it that way. The measuring contest, maybe put it that way, between, again, the state and the federal, which is, Governor Greg Abbott has made it no secret that he is displeased. He has put out press releases to the effect saying that Texas is doing what the federal government is not doing, in his own words, when it comes to border enforcement and dealing with immigration. There have been a variety of laws that have now passed in Texas, including authorizing for arrests. Initially, it was one for arresting anyone for illegal entry into or they can't really do that because that's a federal issue, but of a state level charge of trespassing. So anyone entering the country that was then crossing private property, that was then part of the policy. Another one that is now going through and now has a variety of court cases percolating through that. It's called SB4. It's about charging local law enforcement across the state with arresting anyone that is suspected to have entered the country illegally, whether or not they witnessed it actually happening. So that has a whole level of fraughtness with it that is going before the courts at this point. But so there is a lot of enforcement has been the primary, I think it's pretty fair to say, aspect of the state level response to this, and that has come in conflict with the federal one, with the current administration in place. Their response has been primarily to be dealing with, again, the humanitarian aspects of it here, and then the backlog of cases, because there's waits of years at this point to go through those asylum cases. Some are being removed through the what's called the expedited Title 8 removal, but even those, it's not the what Title 42 was, of just an immediate push back across. So there's so many aspects of it here that it kind of boggles the mind as to try to how to handle it.
Holy moly.
I'm taking it all in.
Well, there was also, it was a few
This is
years further
amazing.
back, but there was an article I had sent you, BD, about the Walmart mass shooting that we had here August 3rd in 2019, and we won't get too much into that. But the shooter, it was in an effort to dissuade Mexicans and other Hispanics from coming to the United States. There was 23 people killed, 22 injured, and so that was, something else that. It was during COVID, so our city was already really shaken up. I remember that day.
I didn't realize that was what that Walmart shooting was all about. I thought it was just another crazy shooting up Walmart.
Guardians of the Children
He had a message?
involved in that somehow. I was actually at one of the I was actually in the court when the victims were reading their statements.
Yeah, so that is according to the online purported manifesto of the now convicted and sentenced killer in that case. But yeah, in that case, that was a individual who drove hundreds of miles, several hours, a better part of a dozen hours out of town to come here and do that. And so that's why, in particular, you kind of asked the question at the start here and about invasion, because that was very much, again, by his own words, purported to be a response to the invasion rhetoric of this here. And why the reasons that, I mean, crisis is absolutely a fair phrase to use, but when you start using the language of war to describe to a situation that is not an armed conflict, I'm not saying that anyone was responsible for that individual's actions besides himself, but you got to wonder, is the way we talk about these things. If we start talking about war, in terms of war, what is on the table when you start talking about war? You start talking about armed responses and things back too. And so that's why I personally refute that phrase entirely. When you talk about invasions, there are those that do that. There are those that make a lot of noise about that. But I refuse that entirely, because we're not looking at individuals who are trying to take over, control territory, change the organization of where they are going into. But there are those that then definitely respond to it in such a way.
And it was one of the most deadly shootings in U.S. history.
And certainly in our city's history.
Oh my gosh! All right, let's bring up this one that you sent us. Immigration policy would further limit asylum access, penalize migrants. Talk to me about that.
So, yeah, again, mentioned one of those laws from the state level on SB4, but from the federal level. So the federal response here is at issue. And also that picture then shows that is part of the Rio Grande. This is actually looking north from Mexico into the United States. So showing that is when some water was running in the Rio Grande, but it's not exactly a kind of a deep experience, so to speak here. There's not a lot of areas.
That's what I always thought crossing the Rio Grande was. And so when I started hearing that people were drowning, I was like, well, how is it possible? You just skipped the Dula across the thing. But like I said, I guess there's parts that are deeper than I imagine.
Depends on how much rain we've had.
How much rain, and if you're talking about the canals, the point where the water is actually being moved for like agricultural or other industrial uses, that's where those primarily happen. Though in some places it can get deep. You get into a deep channel and the water has been released, right? So it does change and vary, but yeah, that has been part of the federal change with it. So we had the current president visit here at the start of last year in January of 2023, and it came kind of after the point of those 10,000 week pardon me, and part of what was then going on was a revamping of federal policies. Of course, we had a change in administrations, different ways of approaching this, and yet there's still been pretty much a lot of similarities in at least the way that the actual emplacement of policies has come in. I mean, sure, there was, the Remain in Mexico policy, Migrant Protection Protocol, so-called Remain in Mexico policy, but we've seen not quite a total return to that, but something very similar, and the changing of asylum protocols. It was even mentioned during the State of the Union speech of maybe trying to put like pauses on it, among other things. So there's been a lot of talk about, okay, so asylum is supposed to be, by international accord, a process where anyone can say, hey, I cannot be in my home country for X, Y, and Z reasons, country that I'm now in, you decide if that is a legitimate reason or not. So the idea of pausing that has been one that, given the circumstances, the way that it's being used these days, has come up quite frequently as okay, sure, you're supposed to then adjudicate each individual case, but given the fact that the process of getting through these, they're called courts and judges, but they're not actual judicial branch parts of things. They fall under the executive branch, and so there's different policies, procedures. There's not the same level of rights. You don't have, right to an attorney, all those kind of things. But even just the hearings to get to that process, again, the backlog is there of years, and so that is what has led to those kind of, in like what that article mentions, of needing to maybe change these policies, or things that we have seen over the past two administrations now has been people, when they again are in the U.S., are supposed to say, hey, I want to claim asylum, but they've sometimes said we don't have the processing, or if they're coming like through the actual ports of entry, the international bridges we have in our areas, they'll say we can't accept you today, go back, we're full at this point for that. Or when they show up there, them being said, okay, you're going to show up for a court date, it's at this point 2-3 years out, because that is the backlog we're looking at.
Man. Man. Okay. This next story, witnesses, and this is something you were talking about, Flex. Witnesses say Border Patrol chased car moments before it crashed, killing 7. Talk to me about that one.
So yeah, that was one of the earlier ones when before there was really the state level response present in our area anyway. That Border Patrol was doing these pursuits of if someone, it seems like they are being a part of trafficking, violating, international or national laws as part of it, that they were pursuing them, and they actually was a lawsuit with the ACLU about that and what was happening in our area, and of course others as well. But based on that, they have backed off on that, though that is now still it's similar type of policies. There have been more reviews and say they were going to, maybe step back from the policy somewhat, but from the state guard and particularly the state troopers, that is still happening. And that's the part that, if I didn't make that clear earlier, while some of the actual, masses of people and the transportation out of our area can be like just at the airport or the bus terminals, those parts have happened across the street from, my former office, or even in not quite my neighborhood, but closer to it. So that has been spread throughout the community.
It almost seems like a damned if you do, damned if you don't with everything, but especially this, like if law enforcement gets behind them, they're going to run through the city at God knows what speed and kill anybody that they run into. But if we don't chase them, then they get to just drive through the city and do whatever the hell they want. If we do chase them, they're going to drive through the city and kill somebody. It's like almost total hands tying here at this point with something like that.
At least with the local response, it can often feel that way. I will say that something that is not often known is that Border Patrol and federal immigration authorities in general have a wide swath of leeway within 100 miles of the border here. So that encompasses, I think, more than half of the United States population. It's not just the border, it's also anywhere near the edges of America. So that includes people on the coasts as well. So pretty much all of us in this conversation here fall within that zone. So north, east, and west of El Paso, there are, within the United States, Border Patrol checkpoints, and those exist pretty much within 50 to 100 miles of anywhere that you would enter through the United States. And so there are further checkpoints that do exist and that do happen, and enforcement there has been of a varying degree. And of, you may have heard of these most likely before this point, because that's where a lot of music artists would get stopped when they had some extra substances on their tour bus, that kind of thing.
Now let's talk about this one. This is more recent, 2024. Mayor Oscar Lesser issues third disaster declaration over migrant influx. So, yeah.
So that was as of technically last week at this point, but within the last week of that continuation of it. And so that was done because of the trained local resources, essentially the local leadership and government saying that, hey, we cannot sustain this response if we even just by keeping it moving. So that was in order to foster more, federal monies, other reimbursements, things like that. A lot of that busing that we talked about was supposed to be actually being reimbursed by like FEMA, among other things, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So that continuation on of it is because we are still seeing, like I said, and what we looked at in those other numbers on that other chart, that there are still thousands of people being released onto the streets of El Paso every week. And now a lot of that, again, moves through our area. So there are some small levels, but there's not like resettlement or rehousing efforts much prevalent in our area as they are then at their, whatever their, points of destination are, while they're waiting for the adjudication of their cases or once it's been granted.
So let's speak for a moment about this idea that it's also a whole bunch of military age men from different countries. Not particular, I've always thought of immigration, being from California, as Mexicans crossing the border to work the fields and then go back home. And I probably still have that old world kind of look.
Yes, you do.
It's changed a little bit. So talk to me about that, because some of my folks are jumping up and down and screaming, you're not even really on the real issue. So is there more to that? We've been talking a lot in my mind about Mexicans crossing the border. Is El Paso seeing this idea of military age men and all these other races, Asians and all kinds of other things coming. Talk to me about that a little bit.
So on the actual like points of national origin, there has been, it has ebbed and flowed there as well. There has been a significant amount of it that has been, points of origin within Mexico itself, but also, I mean, it has been that we've seen people coming from all across the world at this point. Yeah, from Asian countries, from, I would say, still primarily Central and South American. Frankly, what we've seen in our area at certain points have been primarily, or at least at certain points, majorly Venezuelan, because of the collapse that has been happening in that country and of the way that people have then been seeking to flee that. But yes, there have been people from dozens of countries that have been found in our area and, of course, other points of the border. The military age males part of it, I guess I take in a similar kind of way as the part of a discussion of invasion and things like that. Like I'm not saying that there aren't people coming over here with nefarious intentions. There has been reporting that has also happened on the amount of people that have been found that have been on the terror watch list as well. And people say like, oh, that's an example of what's going on. What I will also say is, for the people that I know that work in the federal authorities here, particularly Border Patrol and CBP, but Border Patrol specifically, that are on the front lines of this, particularly when people talk about, another phrase that get used is that we have open borders. Open borders is a legal phrase, meaning that there is no border enforcement, that anyone can cross however they like, that you can do whatever you want. And people may speak at it as like a political point of saying like, well, do we really have a border with the way, the porosity, the way you're talking about it? But I personally, and I know the people who are a part of this, take this personally as so they're just completely disrespecting their efforts and their aspect of it. And I mean, there's a lot of very important work that is done by the Border Patrol agents, both that I know and the ones doing the work in our sector and the other parts of it. And their efforts and the fact that any of these numbers are even coming out is a testament to the work that they do and the support that they need, because this has been across administrations as well, that there has been not hiring, not support, not the resources necessary to do the job, basically, because it's always been a political thing. And you can't just go out and hire like, okay, we want to hire 50 Border Patrol agents, come sign up and we'll get you started here on Monday. It's a multi-year process to even get hired. I actually, in another life, did some of the background investigations for the federal government about going down that pipeline of getting people hired. And it is a whole forms you have to fill out, interviews that come along with it. I believe they're still doing polygraph tests as part of it before you even get to training. So anyone who says, and again, we've been hearing this since, I became aware of politics are more involved back, the second Bush administration, and it's been being talked about since then, and there still hasn't been that significant of a change in the staffing levels. Most of the stuff they talk about is in the support things of hiring more people to like watch the cameras so that the actual agents can go and do the law enforcement aspects of it. But of actual getting the agents on board has been a perennial problem.
Well, boy, there's a whole lot to wrap your mind around here. A lot going on. Next thing I was going to ask, I did not know. That's really weird that the border jurisdiction, you're right, falls on most people in the United States. I don't really see too many Border Patrol folks running around Atlanta, but I guess I'm sure they're here. And the Venezuelan thing, it's really, I said that I haven't been affected by this, and I realize I'm wrong. I'm dealing with this, interestingly enough. I have a new neighbor that has I'm in my office, and so this little office situation, park, whatever you want to call it, there has been a Venezuelan man that has come in. Now, I don't know the status of him, but he's got a lot of workers. They do cars. They do some stuff with cars, and I have noticed a lot of people will kind of file through there as workers. Like it doesn't look like they're being paid very well, and they might be there a week or 2 or 3 and then gone. And there's been a few situations where some have been sleeping around, and they kind of have like a scorched earth policy with how they work and take care of the area around them. So I'm noticing a lot of things going on here. I didn't realize that the Venezuelan presence was elevated, but I imagine, yeah, they've been going through a lot of the stuff in that country for a while. So I'm seeing, maybe I'm seeing more than I'm recognizing that I'm seeing, because
That's right.
Mike Ball has been listening to me commiserate about how upset I've been with what's going on with my neighbor and the things that they're doing.
Nonstop. Nonstop.
And I want to ask Andrew if maybe he'll remember this. I had kind of a similar situation to you, BD, when I was at an iHeart remote. So I was a car dealership, hey, it's Amber out here, come get your car, whatever. And a man walked up, I guess a military-aged male, and he was speaking to me in Spanish, but it was not a Spanish it was kind of different. And he was asking me direction to the crocodilos, the crocodiles. So it's the plaza, right? And it's like a center of our downtown. And he was about what, 10 miles away if it was from Sunland Park Dodge?
Yeah, at least.
So he was like 10 miles away. First, I didn't even see him right up. I don't know how he got there, but he had a phone and I was trying to write out a map for him. He didn't have GPS or anything. And I know at one point there was people coming in that were looking for the plaza, the crocodilos, the crocodiles, because we have like a big statue of a bunch of gators. They used to have live crocodiles there, and now it's a statue of crocodiles, not gators. So why was he looking for that spot? I remember there was something there, and they were all looking for that spot at that time.
Well, it's downtown and near enough to probably the bus terminals.
Oh,
that's what it makes sense.
I did not know crocodiles were called crocodillos.
Crocodilos.
Crocodilos.
We don't have them in California. You know what I mean? We don't have them here.
No one has crocodiles here. They bring them. Like, why the hell do we need a croc? Oh, my goodness. Crocodillos. I think that's going to be my new name. Black crocodillos. I love it. Oh,
gotta practice
it. So, New York City is mad, and they sued a couple bus companies. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So our area has been a transit zone of, again, it's been like a conveyor belt, just like keep it moving has been the local response. And particularly when it comes to the Venezuelans is, when it comes to, in general, not to exclusion, but in general, people coming from Mexico or other Central or South American countries closer than, like, say, Venezuela, they usually have people here. They may have, like, a cousin, an uncle, and someone that then, when they get here, oftentimes, then again, it's not even accounted for in that busing. Yeah, they got someone to say, like, hey, can you send me money for a bus ticket or something like that? And so they will then handle that. So a lot of it was just trying to connect people and get them to, okay, you got a support network somewhere, okay, go to that. But when it came to the Venezuelan situation, they don't have that kind of network, those connections, again, for the most part here. And so that's when we really started seeing people without resources, without means, kind of starting to like build up in our area. So that's why then, like, the local busing really started happening, and why we actually had the mayor of New York City, Mayor Adams, come to our area to kind of do a tour of things, have some conversations with local leaders, and why they were saying that, I mean, they've taken on some tens of thousands of people being resettled in New York City, and why they were saying they're running out of money. I will say personally that some of those numbers don't quite add up to me, not necessarily in the amount of people, but in the amount that they're spending for people. I think I did some rough calculations that I would have been that they were spending more on putting people into, like, what they were claiming was the amount they were spending per person. Like, I don't think it was quite six figures, but close. That was more than they were talking about spending on people in, like, Riker, like with 24/7 coverage and, like, guards and, like, Rikers Island. Like, that's why I was like, okay, I'm not saying you don't have difficulties because you're talking about resettlement as opposed to just moving like we see in this area, but is it really costing that much, or are you covering up, or are you, like, saying, like, well, we got these other budget deficits that we can blame on them, kind of thing?
20,
supply and demand.
Somebody called it a wealth redistribution. I think that was your favorite biker who called it wealth redistribution. And I mean, we got so much of it going on. We just gave billions and billions of dollars to the Ukraine. We're sending billions of dollars over to Israel. for their war. Now we're funding other folks' wars, and they're just taking that money out of your pocket under penalty of prison. And now $27,000 per person, or whatever the case may be. This is just, it's crazy. What is our responsibility to someone that comes and knocks on the door and says, I want in? Is it our responsibility to put them up for 3 or 4 years till we decide whether or not they have a case, feed them, clothe them, house them, or are there jobs for these folks, Andrew? Are there jobs in El Paso for the folks coming in? Are there oranges to pick, or whatever the case may be, or do they even want that?
Not a lot of oranges in our area. We do got a lot of pecans, cotton, and peppers in our particular area.
Chile.
And then, chiles in general. What I will say is that, again, the response has been just completely different. Like, jobs and anything more than temporary has not been the focus in our area. So, I mean, whether or not people have decided to on an individual basis, in mass, no, that has not really been the focus here. And I think that has been part of the concern that has happened elsewhere. What I will say is that one of the things that I've been continuously impressed about, at least in our local community, has been the generosity of El Pasoans in dealing with their fellow man, basically, because really we saw one of the sea changes happen back in 2018 when the federal government's response changed. There had been this basically kind of tacit relationship between the federal authorities, immigration authorities, and the local nonprofit community that offered, like, shelters, hospitality of hey, we got, a few dozen people, because that's what it was at that point. We left them on the streets. Can we drop them off at your shelter, kind of thing? That changed in 2018. And the Christmas week, actually, that it was when the federal government response changed, among other things, due to the levels that was being seen at that point, of where there were dozens, if not hundreds, of people being dropped off in downtown El Paso at that point on the streets. Winter, I mean, we're still the desert Southwest, but it still does get cold here. And what El Pasoans did at that point, have pretty much continued to do so, was marshal response to saying, okay, whatever is going on, let's deal with the humanitarian issues. And so people, both individually and then coming together as groups, including with those nonprofit organizations, came through and said, let's deal with this and let's get these people's needs met, and then deal with what comes after that. And so people were taking bags of oranges out to people and just handing them out, or organizing medical issues or transportation with them to deal with that. So through all of this and all of these challenges, again, I have still been very thankful for the way our community has come together to handle this for the most part.
We even had one of our members, and I was going to go out there with him, but again, I don't remember what happened, but he had bought a bunch of beanies and scarves and gloves for the kids that were sleeping outside. Again, like Andrew said, it's not snowing here a lot, but it still does get really cold. And I know a lot of the biker community, there was actual hotels, motels being set aside for the migrants to move into, like specifically for them. And so they would set up cookouts, and you would take clothes, you would take shoes. There was a bunch of MCs. I know Guardians helped with one of them, and you would go and they would, make hot dogs and hamburgers for them. And I remember playing with the kids. I was playing, soccer with them while they were waiting for their food. And I brought some of my donations. And so, yeah, what Andrew said is true. It was, you really saw a lot of the good come out too in El Paso, especially because it was cold. For us, it's cold.
30s is cold.
I've been traveling across that desert most of my life, living in Oklahoma and living in California and being in the military. I have traveled across that desert most of my life, and I remember one time riding my motorcycle with my brothers on the Cold Ash Run to the Mother. And I remember a damn whiteout in El Paso. I was blown away.
Oh, yeah.
We're on the highway, and it was a white. I was like, El Paso, you're kidding me. And then I was like, dear God, please don't let me have ridden my brothers into our deaths. We're on the 10. Is that the 10 down there? Yeah. We were on the 10.
That's it. Yep.
And it's hugging the southern area of the United States, trying to stay as warm as humanly possible. We had a whiteout there, so that desert is cold as a mofo, bro.
It does get that way. Yep.
It's as cold as it gets. So I want to run through some of these quickly, but it seems like we've talked about just about everything that you've sent me these press releases about. So we talked about this earlier. 13,000 migrants bust out of El Paso, but I didn't know it was in 3 months. Jesus.
Yeah, that was one particular span when it was a high water mark. So it's hard to find solutions for this because it's hard to kind of get your head out of it. But let me put it to you this way: that I mean, I've talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of this is a result of marketing because that's what it is, coming from like the cartels and the coyotes and the organizations benefiting off of this. Because the fact of the matter is that asylum is not an easy process. It's not being a quick one these days. You know, they're trying to expedite it in the El Paso region because the way it has been, I don't know if it's truly this way anymore. You are then going to be adjudicated in whichever district you cross into, and it's done. The Border Patrol districts are the same as where then the asylum cases are. It has been consistent for years now that in the El Paso region, it's above 90% denials of asylum cases, meaning anyone showing up for and claiming asylum in this region, you have a less than 1 in 10 chance, just not even based on your circumstances, of that actually being approved. So logistics kind of become the hugest part of this. There have been, I mean, there's a whole process that goes through, including, you know, it's not exactly like a credible fears hearing. I think it was called that at one point, but exactly what it is of do you even have a reason to claim asylum? Can you articulate a reason? That has largely, I think, been dealt with because the cartels have gotten, again, good at informing people what to say at the basic to at least get you in the line to then be in this asylum process. But it's not something that works. It's not something that actually you're going to get. I mean, it may get you a temporary reprieve. It may be something where because of the backup of it, it's going to take years, but it still doesn't work that way in the long run of it. Though, again, there can be concerns of, okay, what if the people that are just not even going to show back up for it and coming to enforcement? And the people, I do have to say that, the people who say like, oh, well, let's just deport everyone and be done with it. I mean, even before recent years, the number was 11 million. And now, I mean, just based on the numbers in our area of people who are here in an unauthorized manner. And just one quick misconception on that. Now those people cross the southern border. Those also include people who like came on a visa, flew in, and then overstayed the visa, which was estimated to be about like at least half that number. Point is that to do that kind of enforcement, the force does not exist. We'd be having to talk about more manpower than any of the armed forces even combined could muster in order to do that level of like door-to-door, house-to-house enforcement. So the question is what policies can be put into place, and that's one that I've personally been frustrated with, not to get too deep into politics, because again, one very significant thing is that there's not been significant legislation passed when it comes to immigration and border security since the Reagan administration.
Wow.
Migrants break past a human wall vehicle barriers in Juarez to get to the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. Jesus. I think you guys talked about that a little bit earlier in the beginning. Maybe I'm running these things backwards, but geez.
So on that one in specific, that picture that was up with it, those are of authorities on the Mexican side of things. Basically, Mexico, both in response to the previous administration and this current one, they basically revamped their National Guard, Guardia Nacional, to be a border security and immigration force. So it's been present in our areas. You can sometimes see it across the border when you look across, and also at their southern border with, like, you know, Guatemala and Central and South America. So they have their own enforcement that they're doing. But again, you start dealing with large amounts of people. There's even been times in our area when effectively memes, rumors going around online, like that sounds at their face value pretty ridiculous, like the oh, it's National Immigrant Day, which means you get into the U.S. for free. That'll be going around online and being shared, and so you'll have dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of people showing up at, say, particular ports of entry saying, well, no, we're supposed to get in free and clear today. And that was never the case, but that's the power of the information, or misinformation in this case, that gets shared to affect people's behavior, and why, again, the logistics are, it's the whole problem, basically.
Why isn't Mexico putting a stop to this? This must, I mean, all these people that are flexing through our country or into our country are flowing across theirs, so they have just as many Asian single males that are military age as anybody floating through their countries. They got just as many terrorists floating through their country, just as many everything. Just
Well,
as many.
why do you think?
Why
Do you think you see these guys right now? You know what I
Well-
mean? That's part of the answer, I think.
So it's not often talked about in these things, but Mexico actually has pretty draconian immigration policies. Like, it's really hard to become a resident, much less a citizen of Mexico, if you weren't born and already living there, kind of thing. Like, to even then own property, be involved in politics, it is very restrictive. But that is also to say that, Mexico doesn't have control of all of its own territory. It's also not often known that Mexico basically doesn't have an air force. They don't have the ability to, like, if someone was trying to, fly into the United States in an unauthorized way, they'd scramble jets and, intercept them. That does not exist in Mexico. And there are whole swaths of territory that have been effectively, if not officially, ceded to the cartels because they just don't have control over it. But when Mexico's not official, but kind of tacit policy has been, well, if you're crossing our southern border, Mexico speaking in this case, as long as you keep going to the northern border and you don't stay here, fine. That's when there's been the talk about the caravans or things like that have gone on. You think like, well, the Mexicans are allowing this? And the short answer is yes, not in an official manner, but as long as they don't stop here and we won't have an issue. Kind of, you stop here and then we'll have major issues. Has been the, again, tacit, not official policy.
So I just have two more articles from you. We've discussed this a little bit. El Paso City voted to purchase, I guess, an old middle school to be used as a migrant center. Like, how much money are the citizens of El Paso putting out? And is there anything that they're getting back? Is there any kind of money that they're receiving in return? I mean, how much is this costing the citizens to have to deal with something like this?
Yeah, I remember the exact number. What I want to say was in the single millions, probably not over 5 million to buy that particular facility. It was a pretty sprawling, I think it was at least a 10-acre site, middle school there kind of thing. So that was being bought as part of that. And that was using directly with the federal funds specifically. So there has been definitely local expenditures. That was part of the reason for the disaster declarations that have happened because, basically the local governments were saying we can't keep up, like funding the buses or among other things like that, or putting up the shelters or stuff like that. So there is expenditures, but I would say the vast majority of money that is being spent in our area is actually coming from individuals supporting their organizations of choice in order to deal with it. I'll say that what is coming back from it is definitely being the fact that, whenever there is a lack of people on the streets, even though we're having major responses, that's what at least, city leaders point to of why this is ending up working out and why we should end up supporting this and keep doing this. But there has been on some of those charts, actually on that site that I was mentioning, there has been previously tallies of how much money was spent and how much was being supposed to be received back from the federal government. They have since removed that, but as of last year, middle of it, some total was in a few $1 million, and not all of that had been received back yet. But there has been some federal funding and support that has come from this, though it does come with strings attached with it in the way, like those shelters and the ones being supported by the city specifically, since they're supported by federal dollars in the operation of them. They can't take undocumented people who have crossed, so they have to have been processed by federal authorities, or they cannot be accepted there, which has led to other logistical problems, including the lack of trust of people saying, like, wait, I have to have papers to be able to come into here, and that kind of thing, that has led to people then not using them when they're set up. So it's a logistical nightmare is a short way to put it.
Yeah.
So the final one we have is El Paso migrant street releases imminent as numbers rise in shelters. Operators.
Yeah, that has been, we've seen that a couple of times when it's been that people are on the street. I mean, so basically the pipeline, if you want to put it that way, in our area is that those crossing and presenting themselves to authorities get processed by authorities, are held there. They've done some expanded facilities in our area and regionally. The way basically it works is that when it is whenever they show up and whenever there is an influx in one area, they'll sometimes shunt people for processing in other areas. That's what El Paso used to be. We didn't used to have large amounts of people showing up in our area. We were then the periphery. We would then be, say, back in 2014 when it was what we called the unaccompanied minor crisis, because that was one of the first indications of the change going on with immigration and border security, when apparently the prevailing idea was you send across minors, they'll be let in and they'll be Americans and it'll be fine. Again, was not the case, but that was what was being talked about, and that's the way the response was happening. There were still some individuals and family units, adults coming through and those were being like sent to our area to then be processed and then released pending their cases. So they come to federal custody for a time. They cannot stay there due to both logistical and some legal requirements, and then they'll either be handed off to initially the nonprofit community, and now because of the volume we continue to keep seeing, into then the either city or county shelters. And so that's why then those street releases being like, if we're out of capacity, that's it. They just have to then go on to, and hopefully some other church groups or other areas will then hopefully help meet some of their needs to keep people from getting desperate before they can effectively be moved out of the area, has been the continuous focus.
Wow. So, as we kind of cap this off, and first of all, I want to tell you, this has been an amazing amount of time to actually talk to some folks that are on the ground there.
Right.
I'm just like, wow, because I go through it all the time on my motorcycle. I don't be seeing all that. We're rolling across. We stay at the hotel. We get up and we look out and we say, "Oh man, do you know over there is Mexico?" And we see all the lights at night, and it just looks cool. And
You've been to El Paso?
Many times. I go to El Paso a couple times a year because I've got every year we ride back to the Cold Ash Run to the Mother Chapter. So our anniversary is in February, so we have to ride across the United States in February, the coldest time of the year, back to the Mother Chapter of the mighty Black Sabbath Motorcycle Club Nation in San Diego, California. So we ride across the 10, hugging the furthest southernmost route you can, trying to be as warm as you can be. And it doesn't work. You're freezing cold, but you're not riding across the snow on the 20 or the 40, the snow and the ice on the 20 and 40. But hey, we've ridden through ice storms down there, snowstorms down there, and we always stop in El Paso. And the reason you have to stop in El Paso is because of the oil boom that was going on towards the center of Texas. And so hotel rooms were like $400 a night. So you stop in El Paso so that you don't get caught midway in some place like, I can't even think of the names of the cities, but
Midland and Odessa, probably.
Huh?
Midland and Odessa?
Yes. Yeah. If you get around those areas, it used to be, I don't know if it's the same since the fracking stopped or whatever, but for a while, it was so expensive because all of the oil industry people were taking up all the hotels. So you'd pull your dumb ass up to a hotel and it'd be like, yeah, bro, we'll need $450 for you, my bro. And that was for a flea bitten hotel where you had to sleep in your clothes. You're so afraid you were going to get carried away by lice or something.
Yeah, normally the room is $49.99. You know what I mean?
$25 normally, but
when big companies are paying big money, supply and demand.
For the longest time, you would either say, okay, we're going to stop in Houston or we're going to ride until we get to El Paso. And that is a RIDE, my bro. That's a ride. And so you stay there because you could afford to. And there was all this business going on at the time. But we would always stop in El Paso. There's a little hotel we always stopped in. It was a flea-bitten hotel, but you could see Mexico from there, and we would buy all of our cowboy hats and stuff from that place. Gosh, I gotta remember where that place was, but yeah, man. And then of course we had to stop at the Harley Davidson dealership in El Paso many times because those raggedy ass Harleys would break down on the road because they're not roadworthy, and I don't even know why people buy it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He was on a rant.
By the Harley Davidson.
Going off on a 10. Hey, but I tell you what, the Harley Davidson dealer there always put us first. They would always, whenever we break down on the highway, one time, and only one time ever, did my wing go down, because wings don't go down. But one time I had a flat tire on my wing. The brothers had a time with that. But the Harley Davidson dealer fixed my flat tire on my gold wing. They were so I'm all for that Harley Davidson dealer, man. They're the bomb. But anyway, yeah, I ride through El Paso. and it's just a ride through El Paso. We never almost hit any illegal immigrants on the road or nothing like that. So I would have been like, man, there's nothing going on in El Paso. Huh. I guess it's all relative.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's all relative. You know where to look, and you got to know what's going on because
That part.
I mean, it can be hidden if you don't know where to look.
Yep.
Yeah. So I suppose that there is some issues down there. Maybe not a invasion in military type terms, but definitely people are feeling like their land, their time, and their security is definitely being invaded, or crisis level, or something like that.
The response has been sizable, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping at this point in time anytime soon. So, however you want to slice it, I mean, there's a lot of ways people talk about it, and a lot of agendas that get put forth, and the ways people talk about it. There is absolutely response that is needed, changes that are needed, and whether or not there's the political will to do it or not, to just kind of put a point in that, is a continuous question that I'd really have to have. Basically, there seems to be a response of either we need more security or we need to deal with the core cause of it. We need to deal with the humanity aspect of it here. And in my mind, from seeing this, both seem to be necessary, but trying to go back at it at the same time, there does not seem to be a lot of political will for it.
No, there doesn't. They seem to be kicking that political football down the field. What do you see?
I'll talk about politics, so I get into that. Sorry.
What do you see as a? What do you see in the short term? What do you see in the next 12 months to 24 months? That may or may not change in there because Governor Abbott is kicking up a lot of smoke at this point. Do you see any change, or is all this just political posturing?
I mean, again, there's been pretty much a tacit, if not almost explicit, political posturing point by Governor Greg Abbott. I mean, I think that, frankly, this election coming up, 2024, we're in that year, is going to have a major point in what course that will take. Current administration has been more on the kind of response side of it. Previous administration, seeking to become the administration again, was pretty much on the enforcement/stoppage side of it. So that will be, I think, what majorly determines what happens next when it comes to that. In terms of the forces behind it, what is, causing this and pushing this, I don't really see that changing at this time soon, unless, I mean, we're talking about international criminal organizations that are some of the primary drivers of this, that are causing this, and that are then, I mean, not again, this has always been at a level, so there's always been people individually making decisions, but the levels that it's at is not just a whole bunch of people waking up one day and saying, you know what, I'm going to go and give this a shot. It's because they're being told to. It's because they're being told that, hey, you can have everything you ever wanted if you just give us all of your money, and then you'll get all of it back once you head up to there. So the international focus and the working with partners on there, I mean, we've had like delegations from our area, both elected officials, nonprofits, what have you, go to what are referred to as the sending communities down in the Central and South American areas, where we've seen whole communities being depopulated as people all pull up roots. And that's a self-reinforcing cycle, because we mentioned the cartels are the ones that are then saying, hey, give us your money and we'll get you there, wink wink, nudge nudge, give us more money. But they're also, I mean, the violence that they do is part of the causing of it. Leads people to think like, maybe I need to get the heck out of here. So they cause violence, makes people leave, makes people give them money, and means they have more control of it. So there's no real incentive for them in this structure to not do that. So dealing with those partners, because I mean, it's I sometimes use a faucet and a bucket analogy, that you can shut off the faucet, but if you're not dealing with the pressure on the back of it, then you're just going to have a blowout. Or you can keep moving the buckets, but maybe work on dealing with the pressure and handling the bucket situation at the same time. I don't know. A multifaceted approach makes the most sense to me, but again, that's the part that has been not being addressed.
Mm-hmm. So is this part of the new world order? You know what I mean? Is this going to be like the whole new thing and how we deal with it?
Let me just say, New World Order is a phrase with some baggage with it here, but is the current situation the way that it looks like it's going to be going for people? Yeah, I mean, things have continued to change. About the only consistent thing has been the change over time. I mean, it has changed from even within that. I mean, the whole Venezuelan situation was, even in the midst of this, a curveball that happened. So about the only consistent thing has been changed throughout this, but also the levels. And the fact that it's been all over huge has been, yeah, I don't know. there's no real good, simple, anything simple. Anyone saying I've got a simple answer to this is often ends up being wrong in my mind.
Right.
So
this is a very
just trying to-
complicated issue.
super complicated. And so trying to keep on top of it, and I guess just deal with the logistics and the humanitarian aspect. That's what I come down on for the most part, is that if you're just going to say, well, tough luck, y'all are going to just have to suffer, you get enough people suffering and they decide that that's not going to be their situation anymore by hook or by crook. So that just seems like a non-starter for me.
Well, I tell you, I just want to thank you two for being on the show, man. It's just been an informative period of time.
Extremely.
And I really do appreciate you two as guests. Andrew, you've done an excellent job here today. But of course, your radio experience and everything shows, man. You ain't no joke. You ain't messing around. We appreciate you, man. We're gonna tune that mic down next time. I can't have you outperforming our mic over here, though. We can't have
Fair enough.
And Flex, man, thank you for. Did I say Flex, man? Wow.
Yeah,
Flex,
you did. You don't call me man.
Flex woman, thank you so much for being on the show and for bringing our guest for us. And I asked Flex on short notice, find me someone to talk about the what's going on down there, and she turned that around in less than 24 hours. So, man, anything we can do for you guys, man, you know that, Flex.
I was like, I know a guy.
It was a perfect fit.
Flex, what kind of motorcycle do you have? One of those Harleys, is it?
I have a Street 750, a small one.
Yeah, one of those Harleys. Listen,
It rides too.
Really? Andrew, what do you have?
I got a Suzuki DL 650.
All right, man, there we go.
Oh shit!
Yes,
Not
sir.
the cap.
One of my
Actually,
favorite-
I used to help produce his political show, which is hopefully coming back. And his sign off was part of his sign off was look twice for motorcycles.
Hey, Mike, we need to adopt. Can we share that? Can we have that too, Andrew? Look twice
Oh,
for
right, please. It's in my self-interest because I rode here today, so I want people looking twice for me out there.
Yeah, we're gonna use that, Mike. We got to use that from now on. Look twice for motorcycles. Yeah.
Yep.
But listen, man, thank you guys so much for being on the show.
For real.
Man, thank y'all. I really
this
appreciate
was
y'all.
insane. Like we could
Thank you for
we
having
could
us.
literally do like a whole series on this, So
Mhm.
it's hard to
Probably
bunch
this-
into one episode,
Yeah, we're gonna have you back if y'all will come back. We're absolutely gonna have you back and
Yeah,
talk
and your guest, your audience was cracking me up on some of those things.
Pretty interesting.
I wasn't laughing at some of the serious topics. I was just laughing at some of the stuff they were saying.
Oh yeah.
they talk to each other. They want to know about alligators and everything.
and the women in Colleen being the exception. I was cracking up.
Those are our guests. They're bikers, not choir boys. They're bikers, so
That's right.
I love it.
We have to deal with them as they are. But we come from the biker angle over here at Black Dragon Biker TV, and Mike Ball over at Insane Wheels, man. So we're Mike Ball the Wise, we call him. The young man is
Stop
doing
the
his good
cap.
thing.
Stop the cap.
So anyway, hey, listen, Andrew and Flex, thank you guys so much, and we'll let you guys get out of here, and we'll talk to y'all a little later. But thanks for being on our show.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Bye,
Appreciate the
guys.
invitation.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
are
you,
you
guys.
Andrew? Are you back on? Are you still on the radio, or when do we get to? Where do we see your podcast or whatever? Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, I'm doing some other producing projects right now, but if people want to find me, they can find me. Social media is the best place. Talk El Paso is the name of the show here, on hiatus for the moment. Hopefully coming back soon here, but we'll probably just start doing some more stuff because people I know got a lot of questions about this stuff, regardless of where they're coming from. Talk about a lot of local issues, but we got a lot of issues happening locally that are affecting everyone nationally as well. So Talk El Paso on social media is where people can find me for the most part.
Thank you. And Flex, how can folks find you?
Guardians of the Children. I do their social media. Amber Banda on Instagram. Yeah. I mean, I'm not. I don't have as much information as Andrew puts out. It's more just me.
And you're helping work for the children. Absolutely.
Yes,
And-
definitely.
and-
Yeah. So Guardians of the Children, Sun City, or GOC Sun City on Instagram, Guardians of the Children on Facebook. My personal one is I think Amber_Banda 915 or something on Instagram. Amber Banda.
Amber Banda, got you. All right. Thank you guys for being with us, and we most appreciate you. Thanks again.
Talk to you
guys.
soon.
All right.
Man, what a freaking show.
Man, look
That
at
was
the look
that
at
was heavy.
the worms you've unearthed. That was all you, Mike.
Yeah, right.
That was you, Mike the Wise.
No, no, that was you. You brought it here.
That was really cool, man. Okay, so we're gonna be doing some more stuff, man. That was fun. That was
Hey,
fun from the
that's
biker angle.
that's what I love, right
and
there.
we had bikers on the show, man.
Right.
That was cool. All right, Mike. I'm getting ready to be out of here. How about you?
Yep.
We'll be going live on TikTok.
TikTok probably later.
Yeah,
Not right
probably a
away.
little bit later. All right.
All right, my man. I'll be out. See you guys. Appreciate you.
And I'm Black Dragon. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Black Dragon Biker TV weekdays, Monday through Friday. Bike Ball and I out here doing our thing. And we will thank you guys for tuning in so much, man. And we will Gator wants me to so it looks like there are actually crocodiles in America that are not from Africa, like I thought. There are actually crocodiles that are there are two species of them that are actually born in America, in the United States, that are from here, and they exist down in South Florida. Hell, I didn't know. I thought all crocodiles were from Africa and South America or something. I didn't know we actually had no crocodiles here that are native to here. So there we go. Now we know everything. Hey, man, thank you so much, K. Wayne, over in the comment section moderating. So, we got our whole crew here doing the things that we need. And we thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Black Dragon. That's my 2 cents. Love to hear your 2 cents in the comment section below. Thanks for tuning in, and get skinny and get my books. Prepare yourself to take the helm as president of your mighty motorcycle club by delving into the pages of Black Dragon's newest book, The President's Bible, Chronicle 1, Principles of Motorcycle Club Leadership. There you will learn to advance your skills in applying the 14 scientific principles of leadership similar to those taught to officers in the United States Naval Service. Available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. Get yours today on Amazon, Kindle, or order it at your local bookstore. Order your autographed copy from blackdragonsgear.com. Be the best motorcycle club president you can be. Get the book.
Get Black Dragon's first book, The Prospect's Bible, to learn how to join a motorcycle club. It has been an Amazon #1 bestseller for the past 7 years and is required reading for over 3,000 motorcycle clubs worldwide. This book is a must-have for new people venturing onto the motorcycle club set. It will teach you how to prepare yourself for service to the motorcycle club nation and show you how to qualify a motorcycle club to be worthy of your service. Available on Amazon, Kindle, and for order at your local bookstore. Get your autographed copy at blackdragonsgear.com. Be the best motorcycle club prospect you can be. Get the book.